Thank you. My name is Alina SOLTYS. I'm with Quorum Group, and what Quorum does is we are a boutique investment bank that does M&A for technology and software companies. And it's always very exciting to be talking with a lot of technology companies because you get to see all the changes that are coming. And I think one of the most markets that you see these impacts happening is from gaming. So today I'll do a quick update on what's happening in the general space, move into gaming, and then the financing that's happening. M&A, IPO activity, fundraising, and some of the future trends that we see happening, and forecasting those. So first of all, taking a look at the last 2 years on a quarterly basis, this is a group of technology companies that cover everything from IT services to infrastructure to the massive giants that we all know. And if you look at 2012, it really was a stable year for valuations. These are enterprise value to revenue and enterprise value to EBITDA. And then if we look at 13, it really starts increasing as confidence in the economy improves, and we ended the year on a high note. And one thing to keep in mind is with public markets, it really provides a lot of confidence for deals to happen. It provides, as earnings increase, there's cash in the corporate coffers for them to do acquisitions. And it was certainly a busy year. A lot of these companies are very large, and finding new innovative ideas is difficult, so they go after small, nimble companies that have a lot of innovative ideas. And the companies highlighted in green here are companies that did gaming deals. So all familiar names: Yahoo, Google, Apple, Microsoft, Facebook. They're all doing gaming deals. And if we look at the top buyer, Yahoo, with Marissa Mayer, they've been focusing on buying content and mobile companies. And 3 of such were gaming related. So Loki Studios, a location-based acqui-hire, Players Scale for their cross-platform infrastructure support for developers to push content through all of the various devices and platforms, and then Ghostbird for their zombie simulation game. Google bought DeepMind, and this is a really innovative AI algorithm-based company, and the way that they proved it is through gaming. Of course, Google's going to take it and do search and cars and just expand beyond that, but gaming was the place where they proved the idea. Apple acquired the company behind Kinect. Microsoft picked up Gears of War to keep it within their Xbox group. And then Facebook, again, did some infrastructure-related deals. So Parse, which allows developers to really understand what's happening on the Facebook platform, and Spaceport, which is a small firm that did, again, cross-platform applications.
Can I ask you quickly something about the companies that were acquired?
Uh-huh.
So the acquirers are all US, and the acquisition targets were also US? Because PlayScale, I know the guys come from Denmark, but it is actually Jesper that...
Yeah, so Apple's acquisition was of an Israeli firm. Yeah. Most of these are US, but it's not necessarily US targeted. And the buyers on here
US.
Are worldwide, global.
So Europe is not on the radar?
Supercell proves Europe is on the radar.
Okay.
Yeah.
At least one.
Huge one. Okay, that's your turn. So if we look at the gaming markets, the US and China are about equally large. China's a little bit larger at $13 billion. And the reason I put these up is, especially on the US side, it's very clear what is growing. So mobile, up 29% from last year. Free-to-play, up 45% from last year. And finally, companies like Zynga are paying attention, and they're announcing 75% of their new games are going to be mobile first. Free-to-play is going to be a recurring theme, and you've seen it everywhere. The focus is certainly there. If we look at the overall market, 70 billion last year, growing to 100 billion. So there's going to be a lot of companies jockeying for position. Already the market leaders are looking for consolidation plays. They're looking for expansion in geographies. There's a lot of money at stake as this grows. And we can't forget about the BRICS. So Russia took the top 5 spot this year. The market size is over $1 billion. Latin America also is an important space, with Brazil being the largest there, and they're outpacing Eastern and Western countries in terms of growth, both in downloads and revenue. So what does this mean for M&A and investments? I added a few little diagrams to help put the points into perspective. So the first ones with the orange dashed lines is showing investment values. And we see investment values returning back to pre-Zynga levels, so it's stabilizing. And the volume is at all-time highs, the same as last year. So investment continues, and if we look at the M&A side, it's up 29% from last year. We hit an all-time high, $5.6 billion that was spent on gaming, and that's not including the Activision deal. So if you look at the green line, the volume, it's slightly up, and it's not in relationship to the actual value. So it shows that deals are getting larger, the ones that are being done. If we look at a few highlights of M&A transactions that many of you will recall or know, Amazon just last week picked up Double Helix, and they had to announce that because somebody leaked it accidentally. And what they're doing there with the anticipated console systems that they're building, they're picking up developers. And Double Helix had a strong 75-person team. They did some IP for Xbox One. And Amazon believed, through the acquisition along with partnerships along the way, that they can help build out that Connect platform. Zynga finally made a massive move after their new CEO, ex-Microsofty, had some time to really figure out what they need to do. And the good news here for investors and for their staff is they're not focused at buying one-time hits like OMG Pop anymore. They're buying technology and architecture that can be used many times forward. The legalization efforts that have been ongoing in 2013 and that have moved forward and matured a little bit allowed companies like Bally and Scientific Gaming to make huge plays in the market. Paying $1.3 billion, $1.5 billion for WMS, it really shows that the market is starting to feel comfortable to invest in the social and iGaming space. And then, of course, everybody knows the Supercell deal, so moving on from there. Asia. Last year, I talked about Asia hitting the top 8 out of top 10 deals. Once again, they dominated and even increased beyond that. So the top 9 out of 10 deals were done by Asian firms, both acquiring Western buyers as well as doing a lot of inter-regional deals. They certainly have figured out the gaming market. They have the margins. They have a lot of cash to do these deals. And so now it's really coming to a point where they need to keep being ahead of the game by doing these acquisitions. For example, South Korean Gameville set aside $130 million to do M&A and to do early investments into partnerships. They bought out a company that was older and larger than them for their international presence to expand from there. And then companies like those that are not in the highest markets. So India has a relatively small gaming market, but they have firms that are realizing they're not stuck with just India. So they're buying Japanese companies, they're buying Korean companies to expand and to still have a foothold as those markets develop. If we look at the public firms, 20 online gaming deals, of which 12 were mobile focused. Mobile is a recurring theme along with Freetoplay, and it's really pointing out that that is where the largest value is. Chinese companies drove $3.1 billion out of that 5.6, so it certainly makes sense for that top 10. And then I have a lot of information on these slides. I'm not going to go through it all, but I can make it available for you afterwards. IPO activity, once again, The story is with Asia. Last year, 4 gaming companies IPO'd, all from China. If we look at the last 3 years, 13 out of the 15 deals were Asian-based. This allows them to have a lot of upfront funding and cash to do deals, and it makes sense because if you look back, 11 and 12 has driven the M&A activity that we've seen in 13. If we look at some of the companies that are considering IPOing on the Western front, there is some holdbacks that they're experiencing now. There's, when you IPO, there's a lot of complexity and added regulation, and you may lose your competitive advantage because you have to disclose a lot of things. So Rovi has taken a step back. They're focusing on growth, on increasing more diversified base beyond Angry Birds. King, who was once thought as too successful, has been seeing some decreasing in their earnings. Kabam is waiting on other investors to take the first steps and test out the market sentiment. And so once again, we return back to Asia, which is the most likely next IPO with Line, who's just experiencing amazing growth. And Line is not typically a gaming company, but the amount of money that they make through in-game purchases, over half, sets them up in this space.
About King, why is everyone saying that the IPO is being delayed? I don't think it was ever announced.
Can you repeat that?
Why is everyone saying delaying IPO? I hear that lately more often, but as far as I know, the IPO was never announced.
No, it wasn't. It was being circulated as they were thinking about it.
Yeah.
Once they announce it, they have to do the filings, and so it becomes official.
Yeah.
And it's much more difficult to pull back and maintain your image at that point.
So they only filed in the sense of they put some papers in there, and there's no amount in there. They've not said how much they're going to raise. It was just...
Yeah, it's a rumored runway of IPOs that are potentially happening.
Okay, and down 7% month over month. Is that just because Candy Crush is over its top?
Can you repeat that again?
Down 7% month over month, it says there. Mm-hmm. So if you look at King, I mean, they have more games live, but the only one that comes to mind is Candy Crush. So can we assume that Candy Crush is over its top? Is it declining now?
It's hard to say, because there is month to month. If you look at the timing with holiday gaming, there's always an increase, and then January, February, there may be some downplays from there, but gaming companies need to keep releasing hits, and Candy Crush is one of those that amazingly has survived for so long. And you see the same thing with Puzzles and Dragons, which is a huge Asian firm. So it's not, related to market space or even by type of game. It's just the industry. You need to keep releasing hits. And we talked about the one hit a year would be amazing if you could keep consistently doing that. It's difficult to do.
Okay, and Kabam, you say waiting on King, but Kabam basically had last year a round where I think they bought out all the people that had some shares, first employees, so I think that was a cleaning operation. Mm-hmm. Why are they not being acquired for 51% by some of the Asians, like Supercell had?
Yeah, so that is a common theme. If you look at technology companies, those that want to reward their employees and keep them staying around, they raise these large funds and help distribute and keep them comfy so that they keep performing and creating these games. And it's very common if you look at a company like SurveyMonkey, run by Sheryl Sandberg's husband. They made the same choice. They would rather raise $800 million than IPO because of the complexities that I introduced earlier on. So it's a management choice at that point. Which brings us into funding and fundraising. This is a confidence survey done by Deloitte, and if you look at the various countries, they're all about half and half in terms of 2.5 out of 5 in confidence rating, except for China. China's at 4, and that certainly has increased their ability to do very big deals. So Line Kong raised $80 million last month, And they're planning on both increasing their R&D teams as well as their partnerships in an effort to make 10 mobile games this year alone. Kickstarter, we just talked about that as well. Funding, VCs typically focus on a little bit later stage, companies that have some sort of proven traction, and Kickstarter really has stepped into the role of Series A or even type of series where they just invest in ideas. And 20% of Kickstarter's overall value that's been raised is into games, and these are both digital and physical. But it has led to some very big success stories as well, like Star Citizen, which raised $37 million for a space simulation game. So I quickly wrapped 2013 into a wrapper where, M&A is very strong. We just came off market highs. Asia is doing a lot of deals. There is a lot of money out there in both VC investment, private equity, corporate coffers. So where do we see that happening, and what are some of the things that are impacting where companies are focusing their attention? And one of those is the OTT messaging that's happening in China. Now, it's technically not totally game related, but the amount of revenue that is driven through in-app purchases is pushing it into this category. And Asia is really on the dominant front of this with KakaoTalk, WeChat, Line, and it's creating a new kind of ecosystem for companies to develop games and grow them. And DNA, not being fully in these, has felt the pinch. Their quarterly numbers are down. And if we look at companies like Tencent that are looking forward, they anticipated some of this and upgraded their WeChat app to include games and emojicons, and a mobile payment system that just creates a walled garden. So you never have to leave. You can keep playing and keep paying within that space. And they've dedicated their next, they're looking at acquiring companies that can keep adding into that WeChat platform. So players are happy and keep staying there. The top games in Korea and Japan, 13 out of the 20 are found within these platforms, so it's certainly here to stay. And the way that the social interactions happen between players is very different than in a Facebook environment. They're here to play the games, and they're here to talk with people who are into those games. So it is certainly impacting the next wave of Asian companies, and they should be thinking about how they're developing these games and how they can participate in this ecosystem. The legalization front and the movement there has generated those billion-dollar transactions that I talked about. There's also many smaller ones that are being done by land-based casinos and by iGaming companies. But there is still a little bit of problem with traction. Credit card companies are not looking forward to having to deal with the legal ramifications of having players pay with them. So the payment processing systems certainly need to step up before they're really felt by the market. And this is shown clearly by IGT's revenues. They still make 6 times more from their social casino product. Free-to-play, I've said mobile and free-to-play many times already in the past few minutes. And if you look at the top 9 out of 10 games that made over $100 million, they were free-to-play. And it really comes down to a skill of monetizing and how do you make the player feel valued without just draining all of their coins. And it's also reached a point where the scalability of the architecture is really impressive. World of Tanks just recorded 1.1 million players playing simultaneously. So it certainly does require some level of sophistication to keep these systems operating. And then we can't move on without talking about the consoles and monetization that's happening there. There's actually a lot of AAA style gaming companies that are using free-to-play and incorporating them into their Xbox One and PS4 environments. And it's a shift that's happening, and it's a relatively new one because you're working with highly developed graphics and a lot of front-end investment in a monetization setting that may or may not pay out. So that it is a risky situation for a lot of companies, but it's also very important for the new console companies like Amazon, Apple, and Google who are doing, or rumored to be doing, these set-top living room boxes to include gaming, and then also they're going to be targeting everybody else who's in the family to use those products and pay for content. China opened up their doors for consoles, and Microsoft is anticipating a delivery schedule of Q3, so that's still a little bit early to tell until later on into the year, but it could impact a huge market space if they're willing to step away from their phones and their PC consoles there. So to wrap this up, talking with a lot of companies, they always ask, how much are we worth? And the second question that they usually ask afterwards is, what can we do to be worth more and to drive those numbers higher? Given the broad audience base that we have today, I can synthesize it to a few main points. First one being growth. It's super key to have growth, especially after you have built up your platform, you have the content there, showing those numbers, and then after a period of time showing profitable margins will certainly capture people's attention. If you have built it from the very beginning, anticipating somebody buying you, they're going to want to see scalability. They're going to want to see your architecture being very steady and strong, and they're going to want to see you being able to push this content out through all the various platforms and doing it very cost effectively and quickly. So all the revisions that keep players interested and keep them coming back, that also needs to be almost at a flip of a light switch rather than an intensive process that takes weeks to launch. And then with the monetization front, moving to free-to-play analytics. There's some companies that we're talking to now that have teams of people within the analytics department that are larger than their development base. And that really indicates that they're going to be understanding what makes their gaming company successful and what keeps them on the top of the list. There's too much noise out there to really start successful companies and know them from the very beginning. So analytics help drive that performance and help you move those points forward. And having somebody come in, look at your company and see all the validation that's been done and the various things that you've been doing to change it really impacts their ability to purchase you and draws their attention to possibly bringing those analytics components into their own systems. So with that said, and these points covered as you're thinking about the companies that you're building and the themes that I touched on, that's where we're seeing a lot of the next year coming and what's going to drive the next level of M&A deals.
Cool. Well, thank you. You actually, I'm there with you when you talk about consoles. But when you talk about cross-platform, have you ideas about that? So that basically the mobile can be used as an acquisition tool, and you can be behind a PC or you can be on a console, so play at any given time, on any given device, wherever you want. Have you seen any trends in that area?
So you're talking about it from the gameplay perspective rather than the back-end infrastructure?
Both.
Both, okay. So from the back-end infrastructure, the gaming deals with Yahoo and with Facebook, that's what they were buying. They were buying the tools that were built up to help gaming companies spread out through all the platforms. That's complicated to do, and those companies are being purchased because a lot of developers haven't thought about that in the front end, and they're relying on these third-party services, which is fine, but it's also pointing out, these development tool companies are attractive because of that reason. The other end of the coin, with the gameplay where you're playing on your PC, then you put it on your mobile phone and you walk out with that. There are some interesting applications with that. It's very difficult to do because the level of detail and the level of play is very different. So it's certainly a challenge. I'm looking forward to seeing a company who's doing that really well.
And then the statistics automatically, because you say statistics in-house, but then the developer only sees its own campaigns. I mean, it's in a field where I actually started IQ to be cross-platform, so we could actually see of all the games that would be working cross-platform, who's already being triggered on which platform and how can we get them deeper into the game. So if you talk about statistics, what are, because can you go back to the last slide, because you say statistics becoming key to improve and build upon performance, often in-house systems. Does it also give companies the chance that actually do that as a service to these gaming companies?
Yeah, so I think I know where you're going with this. And a lot of companies do use those third-party services. And their games are so specific, and oftentimes the template that may be developed is not good enough for them. And so then they're taking the next step of identifying what traits really matter to them, and having oftentimes to either customize and work with those third-party applications, or bring it in-house and start developing their games, the next levels of games, with those analytics in mind from the very beginning.
Cool. Thank you very much. Does anyone have some questions, statements? One in the front.
Hi. What kind of EBITDA and revenue multiples do you see for smaller gaming companies?
Yeah, so that's always a loaded question. With smaller gaming companies, oftentimes it's about the technology and about the team, and revenue may or may not be there, or it may be very small. And so if you look at some of the deals that are 20 million or 30 million, and your revenues are 1, then those multiples are very high, and they're not the same as some of the larger, more established players would expect. So it really comes down to fit. If you have a strong engineering team, and somebody needs to build out their development platform, you have the upper hand, and then it's more of a per head type of calculation. The EBITDA multiples also can be tricky depending on how low your cost structure is, and if you're paying your people fairly, if you have extravagant expenses, or if you don't have any expenses. So the EBITDA multiple also moves around because of that.
Anyone more? Okay, then thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.